Tributes continue to pour in for former Finance Minister and Reserve Bank Governor Tito Mboweni. He passed away last night at the age of 65 after a short illness. President Cyril Ramaphosa has hailed Mboweni for his contribution to the country's economic policy and his fiscal discipline.
As Governor and Finance Minister, he had a sharp focus on fiscal discipline and economic transformation. Tito Mboweni distinguished himself in different strategic roles in the private sector and was a flag bearer in global forums of our economy and developing economies more broadly. He conducted himself with expert rigor while maintaining the personable touch that made him a social media star and ambassador for Mojaji's Kloof culinary traditions.
And we continue on reflections on the passing of Mboweni, and we speak now to another former finance minister, Trevor Manuel. Mr. Manuel, very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. Just last month, we're paying tribute to former finance minister Pravin Gordhan, and now yet again another former now finance minister also passing away at the age of 65. What are your reflections this morning?
No, Alron, that's not the point to start. It sounds too ominous that it's about finance ministers. No, I want to emphasize Tito Mboweni, the person, the comrade, the friend, and how committed he was to the lives of people in South Africa. He left for exile at a very early age from University of the North, Turfloop, went to Lesotho, did an undergraduate degree, went to the UK to do a master's in development economics, and continued on that trail. He used to laugh and say it was much better as an economist than as an attempted guerrilla in Umkhonto we Sizwe. But that was Tito. He was able to live out his commitment to the people of this country. The establishment of the Department of Economic Planning in the ANC, which was quite important in laying the basis for a whole range of issues, ready to govern, the RDP and so on. Tito was front and center of that entire approach. When he became Minister of Labour, much of the rights enjoyed by workers in South Africa now emerged from that period of his tenure as Minister of Labour. Whether you're talking of the Labour Relations Act, the Basic Conditions of Employment Act, the Employment Equity Act, and the establishment of NEDLAC, all of those emerged from the very short period that he served as Minister of Labour with the clear intention of ensuring that we improve on the lives of working people in this country. I'm saying that those records stand and they will outlive Tito by a very long margin because it's embedded in the lives of working people in this country. And then he moved on to become the governor of the Reserve Bank after a period as the advisor to the governor was then Dr. Chris Stals. He covered himself with aplomb as minister, as the governor of the Reserve Bank. And then he took a period in the private sector before returning as Minister of Finance. But I'm saying it's all of his adult life has been in the service of the people of South Africa. A number of traits will stand out, including his deep commitment to people, but also Tito's commitment as perhaps one of the unapologetic non-racists in South Africa. In his circle of friends and in his entire association, he didn't ever see race as an issue. He saw opportunities to transform the country. And it's that, I think, that of which economic policy is a small part. It's the overall transformation of South Africa, creating new opportunities for people that will establish Tito as this committed activist throughout his life. For South Africa.
Yeah, and thinking back now to the transition, 1994, what is it about Tito Mboweni, very young still at the time, 35, 36, Nelson Mandela then says that this is a person that I have absolute confidence in to be a Labour a minister form part of the cabinet, and we understand how important Labour is, especially during that tenure and then transition as well. But what was it about Tito Mboweni and his gift that Nelson Mandela had identified and said this is somebody that should be part of the first cabinet?
Well, one of the things we do know, Aldrin, is that heads of state never disclose what the reasons are for their decisions. But Tito was he was there. He was broadly connected. He, even before he was a minister, didn't miss a conference of COSATU, which was then the premier federation, or any of its affiliates. He was always in that space. But similarly, Tito had this ease of connection, and so his ability to link with business people, whether at that time NAFCOC was a very strong business organization, or organizations like SACI and the forerunner to BLSA. Tito always made it his business to connect with people wherever they found themselves and try and bring them in. By the same token, Tito was one of those people who would go to church and link with people. His personality was very much shaped on interactions with people, and that is why I think the love for Tito was very strong, and we felt right across South Africa, regardless of race or language.
Yeah. Then, of course, the other issue is around fiscal discipline, something that people keep on bringing up through and through. And I remember when he came in after Nhlanhla Nene had resigned, one of the points that he raised was around the inefficiencies with some of the SOEs and why the list should be consolidated and government should identify which SOEs can be SOEs that government can still work with and which SOEs should government try and see whether they should get rid of it. What do you think informed that position that he held, that perhaps maybe the state shouldn't be involved in every single facet of the economy?
I think Tito's determination was shaped by evidence. You allow yourself to be led by evidence. If you need a logistics operator, what should it do? What should it control? And to what extent? How much should you draw from the fiscus for it? And to what extent must it, speaking of Transnet, obviously, be run on the basis of its own revenues and the strength of its own balance sheet? Those issues were very, very important. And I think they determined the way in which Tito approached all of the state-owned enterprises. Part of the challenge, I think, is that by the time he became Minister of Finance, the debt levels in all our SOEs were quite beyond the pale. I mean, I look back on the privilege I had because I didn't transfer anything into the SOEs when I was Minister of Finance. But thereafter, debt in the SOEs became completely untenable, and Tito coming in, as he did after the period of state capture, found himself in an enormous battle against what had happened in the SOEs during that earlier period of 9 years.
Yeah. Had he ever had a conversation with you at the time as finance minister while he was the Reserve Bank governor, around an opportunity to take on a third term as the Reserve Bank governor, and why that wasn't seen through?
Well, I left before the third term issues arose.
Yeah.
I think that there are very important questions about term limits. I mean, I think that it needs to be shaped by circumstances. One of the people to whom Tito was very close on the African continent was President Paul Kagame in Rwanda. And Tito worked with him on the AE Institutional Reform Panel since 2016, actually. And Tito was very, very committed to this body of work for the African Union. And you know that President Kagame had just been re-elected for a fourth term as president. So I'm saying there's no magic in this. I wouldn't take the same view to somebody like Donald Trump in the United States, The issue of term limits, I think, is something that needed to be considered. It's not entrenched in any legislation. The challenge with positions like that of the governor of the Reserve Bank is that it's the call of the president, frequently in consultation with the Minister of Finance. That certainly happened with Tito and I when I was finance minister and he was central bank governor, and the president would consult in these matters, but I don't actually know what happened thereafter. But that consultation is quite important because it allows governments to establish teams of people, both within the cabinet and outside thereof, where the central bank governor, for instance, finds him or herself.
Yeah, and fast forward once again to his tenure now as finance minister, the height of COVID-19. We saw the massive looting that was taking place at the time. And you had said that you believe that there's more that Treasury can do to try and curb the levels of corruption that was taking place. With some of the reforms that have been introduced, do you think that Treasury is now in a much better space to try and curb the corruption that we've seen in the country?
Eldred, I have a view that says that legislation is one part of it. It's the action that matters. And part of ensuring that you have action on corruption is ensuring that leaders are actually prepared to take risk, especially when it comes to their friends. And, you know, I think that in the context of so much, whether you're talking of the recommendations of the Zondo Commission report, or you're talking of those unresolved matters from the COVID period relating to things like PPE, the stories of the state of health, especially in a province like Gauteng, and then I'd like to add the Eastern Cape as well. Unless you deal with these issues, unless there are consequences for misbehavior, I think that legislation is just words on paper. You've got to make it count, and that is what I hope will follow on. And Tito's commitment to fighting that corruption, I think, doesn't end with him breathing his last breath. It's a struggle that has to continue, and perhaps in the interests of the poorest in South Africa, we must ensure that there's better value for money in respect of public services.
And just a quick reminder, once again, former finance minister, is why did he always carry the aloe plant?
Well, Tito's ruggedness, right? He came across, I mean, from being the Esquire, best dressed politician, to this ruggedness that he had towards the end of his life. A story told also by the shoes he wore and the rugged environment he lived in Maguba's was whether we can find within South Africa, and in the case of the aloe plant, it's the ability to regenerate, notwithstanding drought and other tough circumstance, the ability to regenerate. And that was, I think, in many ways, what became the leitmotif for Tito in the way in which he approached economic development in South Africa. The ability to regenerate, notwithstanding what had gone before.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time. A former finance minister there, Trevor Manuel, paying tribute to one of his former colleagues there, also former finance minister.